The 4th of July, an independence we should never forget.
Vlogging pod starts like a conversation. Cup of coffee with no destination. Just voices trying to understand what's happening across this land. From your stories told to the pages turned. Every question, every word, supported by SheShareStudios.net.
Hello, and welcome to the Vlogging Pod. 4th of July is just around. So I thought today we would do something a tad different. Let's talk about why we celebrate Independence Day. You know, the day with all the fireworks, cookouts, parades, and time with family. But often, do we stop and ask ourselves what exactly we're celebrating? Was it simply that America became its own country? So let's take a short journey with that thought in mind. Through history, and let's bring us back to today's day. Because some recent Supreme Court rulings have renewed an old debate and dates all the way back to our nation's founding. When American colonies declared independence from Great Britain in 1776, they weren't simply separating from another country, they were rejecting concentrated power. Many of the complaints listed in the Declaration of Independence were directed at King George III, whom the colonists believed had accumulated too much authority over their lives, that experience shaped the thinking of our founding fathers. When the Constitution was later written, they intentionally divided power among three branches of government. Congress would write the laws, the president would carry out the laws, the courts would interpret them. Each branch would act as a single check on the others, and so no single office or person could accumulate too much authority. That system of checks and balances has become one of the defining characteristics of American government for nearly 250 years. As our country grew, Congress also created certain independent federal agencies. Those agencies were designed to carry out specific responsibilities with a degree of independence from day-to-day political pressure. Hence why they were independent federal agencies. Their leaders generally could not be excused them or could not simply be removed because a president disagreed with their decisions. The principle has been protected by the Supreme Court precedent dating back from 1935. For more than 90 years, it remains on the guardrails that defined how executive power and independent agencies interact. Now, let's fast forward to today and talk a little bit more about the Supreme Court rulings before I make my final point. One case the court has declined to rule on, the civil judgments involving E. Jean Carroll, who prior had lawsuits against the head of this administration from defamation and sexual abuse claims. The Supreme Court, after reviewing the case, pushed ahead by the head of the administration, chose to decline to take up those appeals, leaving the lower court's judgments in place. The Supreme Court also declined to block state laws that allowed mail-in ballots to be not counted by the election day, leaving state law to be counted, leaving the ballots to be able to be counted after the election day if they are postmarked on time. Those decisions demonstrate that the Supreme Court does not simply rule in favor or against the head of the administration. It considered each legal question separately in these current rulings, these particular times. But then comes another decision. The Supreme Court ruled that the president may remove leaders of certain independent federal agencies, overturning a precedent that had stood since 1935. Which brings me back to my beginning of my conversation of today, 4th of July, or our Independence Day. So why does this matter as we celebrate the 4th of July? Because Independence Day doesn't always, because Independence Day isn't only about separating us from England, it's about the ideals that followed. Our founding fathers believed liberty depended not only on elections, but on limiting power. They designed a system where government would constantly balance itself. That doesn't mean every Supreme Court decision is the most popular. It doesn't mean everyone will agree where those lines should be drawn. In fact, Americans have debated those questions for nearly 250 years. The recent support court decision reminded us that the Constitution is still a living framework that courts continue to interpret. Sometimes those interpretations expand, especially in this case, presidential authority. Sometimes they limit it. Sometimes they leave long-standing rules exactly where they should be. Whether you agree with this decision or disagree, understanding why these guardrails are in place is very important and explains why they shouldn't be changed. As we celebrate the 4th of July, maybe take a moment between the fireworks and family gatherings to remember what Independence Day truly represents. Not just freedom from another nation, but the continuing responsibility to understand our Constitution, systems of governments, and the balance of power that has shaped the country since its very beginning. Because history isn't just about something we celebrate, it's something that states should stay in place as guardrails to our continuing future. Today's sources come from the Declaration of Independent National Archives, U.S. Constitution National Archives, Humphrey's Executive versus United States, Supreme Court decision expanding presidential removal authority, Reuters, E. Jean Carroll appeal, Reuters. Thank you for listening. Until next time, bye-bye for now.